we talking about practice. Not a game, we talking about practice.
Welcome everybody to the After Practice podcast with myself, Lake Lewis. Definitely appreciate you joining us today. And as we always do, we talk about the Washington Commanders. And right now, the NFL Combine is going on in Indianapolis. And a lot of people want to know, how is this team going to maneuver as far as potential draft picks, even as far as free agency, considering that there could be an ownership change coming up. And we're going to talk about all of that on today's podcast. You know, right now in Indianapolis, Ron Rivera came out yesterday on Tuesday, and he said to the media, hey, listen, we're here to get football players. You know, he's not going to worry about the other stuff. But at the end of the day, you do have to realize that Ron Rivera is calling the shots right now for this organization. There's no doubt about that he's calling the shots for the Commanders. And he said it last week when we were sitting in Ashburn at Eric Bieniemy's press conference, and we'll talk about that too. You know, Ron Rivera, he said that there's no pressure on them as far as the potential ownership change, as far as the way they can go about conducting business. And that's a good sign if you're a Commanders fan. You want to hear that. You want to hear that from the X's and O's standpoint on the field, things can still progress. You know, we know that this is a young team that has a lot of talent across the board on pretty much everywhere. I think that they obviously have to build up that offensive line, but to know that they can continuously get better. And let's be honest, Eric Bieniemy is not coming to Washington if there weren't some assurances as far as his future with the ball club and also with the future of the team. You know, so they're all saying the right things that, hey, they don't, you know, it's not their pay grade to talk about what's going on with ownership. That's not for them. But clearly they're the faces of this franchise right now, and they're the ones that are calling the shots for the Commanders. So as always, folks, you can follow this podcast. You can subscribe to it. You can go anywhere you want as far as any carrier. It's on there. Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. It's on there. And then, of course, if you want to watch it, you can go on YouTube and subscribe to the Sports Journey YouTube page, and you'll see After Practice Podcast. You'll see the likes of some of my old podcasts and broadcasts that I did over the previous years with several players that played for the Redskins at the time, and then the Washington football team, and now the Commanders. So you can always go on sportsjourney.com too and see some of the great work from the likes of DJ Bland, Karita Parks, Bob Matthews, Sergio Rodriguez. I mean, all my good folks, you know, they're doing some really good work there. Serge the Shooter, some of the good stuff he's done with me over the past several years. So you can see all of that stuff there on the site. As far as right now, the now, you've got to feel good about the Commanders and as far as where they're going forward. And I think right now, this is a team that's on the upward trajectory. We're trending upward, so to speak. And I think right now, if they can get their quarterback position solidified, is it Sam Howell? Is it another free agent they'll go out and get? Or are they going to even draft a quarterback? I know I've mentioned the likes of Lamar Jackson coming to Washington. I think that would be a coup for this team. But clearly, they'd have to give up a whole lot. And I don't think that they're that far off to have to necessarily do that. Don't get me wrong. As I said, I'm a Lamar Jackson fan. And if you can get a Lamar Jackson in the building to go with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuels and, you know, Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, I mean, my God, this could be a lethal offense under new offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. But that's kind of wishful thinking. I think it more makes sense at this point to have Sam Howell be your QB1, which he is at this point because he's the only quarterback under contract on the roster. So by default, he's QB1. But clearly, if he can win out the job, because I'm sure they're going to bring a veteran in to challenge him, it could be Taylor Heineke. Regardless, they're going to bring someone in to try to, push all the right buttons at that quarterback position. And hopefully the guy pushing the buttons, Eric Bieniemy, new offensive coordinator, has it all happening. But right now, Sam Howell will be in his second year. He's under a rookie contract, which saves money to disperse amongst other players. You think about what happened. Daron Payne franchised. I think that was a brilliant move for the Commanders because Daron Payne had the best year of his career last year, 10 plus sacks as a tackle, interior tackle. That's impressive. So you look at what he did, best year of his career. You want to see him follow that up with another, stalwart season. He needs to do that again before you can really justify giving him excess of $20 million. And think about it, folks. If they were to do that, that's almost $40 million, around that ballpark that's designated for two interior players in John Allen and ultimately Daron Payne. So you've got to make sure you hit a home run on this if you were to give Daron Payne next year a big-time contract. That's unheard of for any NFL team to do that with their two interior linemen. That just doesn't really happen. So Washington's in a unique position, and it's a special position. And those two guys are the face of their defense right now, doing really well. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with Daron Payne. Now, the other side of it is that by franchising him, you kind of free up some money as far as not having a guaranteed long-term contract, because now you can see what you can do with a guy like Cam Curl. Cam Curl is a safety that really came out of nowhere, and a lot of people in the SEC world was talking about this guy coming out of college, and he's had a really nice career, start to his career, so to speak, but he has had the injury bug of late. So if you're Cam Curl and you're Washington, you want to make sure he can stay on the field, because when he's on the field, he's a definite difference maker, and he gives them, a home run threat to man the secondary for them. We saw a surprising, I say surprising release. Bobby McCain was released a couple days ago, and, a lot of fans on my social media weren't happy about it. But I think you have to understand this. When you become a competitive team, when you become a team that has a lot of talent on it, which I think the Commanders are at this point right now, they're competitive. Yes, they didn't make the playoffs, but they still were competitive. Now they're trying to take the next step to not just be a playoff team, but to be a contender. So with that being said, you think of all the good teams over the years. They've had tough decisions to make in the offseason. They may have gotten rid of fan favorites. They may have gotten rid of guys that have been there and actually were productive. Bobby McCain was productive last year. When they moved him from free safety pretty much and put him in the slot, he really impressed me. I mean, he stood out. But with that being said, by releasing him, you save almost $4.5 million that you're going to need to give to some of your younger players. Bobby McCain will be 30 years old before the season starts, and that's getting up there when you have two 23-year-old bookends that you have in Derek Forrest and Cam Curl playing safety, and then you have Percy Butler, who I think impressed as a rookie, and he's a natural free safety. So they feel good about where they are at that position, and that's why, hence, they let Bobby McCain go. It's surprising, but nevertheless, at the same time, it makes sense. There's probably going to be a couple of other cap hits, too, later on, because you have that June 1st designation, and then afterwards, it doesn't hit as hard on your salary cap. So a guy like Logan Thomas, a tight end, yeah, I'm saying it. A guy like Logan Thomas could be a potential candidate to be released later on in the summer. And that's because he's coming back from an injury. And then you have a guy underneath him, behind him, in Cole Turner. Then you have also John Bates. These are two really good young tight ends that collectively could probably give you something close to what Logan Thomas is giving you. So that's another name you're going to have to be leery of. I think a guy like Chase Roulier, one of my favorite players on the team, nice guy, great interview, by the way. You get him at center. He's one of the better centers in the NFL. The problem is the last 2 years, he hasn't been able to stay on the field because of those injuries. And when you have guys that are constantly getting injured, you really can't justify paying the big bucks if they're not on the field. So he may be a guy that they may take a hard look at. There's going to be these kind of decisions that need to be made now for this team. And those are the good things. That means that you have arrived with your talent base. That means that you're able to compete, which means everyone can't make that 53-man roster. Somebody's going to have to go. And in this situation, I think the Washington Commanders are at that point now where they're starting to really stretch out their roster with talent everywhere. The big thing is they've got to get better at offensive line. That's the elephant in the room. Everyone knows this. If the Commanders can shore up their offensive line, for one, it's going to help Sam Howell if he is indeed QB1. It'll help the offense under Eric Bieniemy be able to do all the things that he did in Kansas City, where they can just stretch the field, they can go deep, they can go underneath. they can basically feed the person that's having their best game that Sunday. But you need an offensive line if you want to do any of that. If you don't have blocking up front, it doesn't matter if you have Patrick Mahomes back there. Well, maybe it does a little bit. But in Sam Howell's situation, he needs the best offensive line in front of him in order to succeed. So the Commanders have a lot of things going on. They're in Indianapolis right now, Brain Trust, and I would think that they're looking at every offensive lineman they possibly can. Perhaps they'll sprinkle in a corner or two, look and see what they can do in the secondary to get some depth there. And then, of course, the other thing that they've got to address is their linebacker position. They re-signed David Mayo. Not a bad thing. I mean, he's a veteran guy. He's a good locker room guy, but he's not a starter in my opinion. And I think if you're Washington, you've got to shore up the middle and you've got to shore up the other side. I like Cole Holcomb. Not sure if he's your everyday middle linebacker. I think he can be, don't get me wrong, but we have to see it. He was injured a lot this year. And ironically, even though he missed 6-7 games, he still was 5th in tackles. So he's a tackle machine, which is tailor-made for the middle linebacker position, which is not bad. But we're going to have to see him prove it again and stay healthy. That's the other thing. Jamin Davis had, I think, a wonderful second year. His first year was maligned. People thought he was going to be a bust. And I always tell people, hold your horses there. I mean, this guy was in his first year. They moved him to a different position from what they had envisioned him being. His second year, they moved him to the outside. And they moved him back in at Mike at times. And he looked really good this year. And I saw the glimpses of what they think he can be. And I think the third year is his year to really shine and really blossom in this defense, Jack Del Rio defense. But outside of those two guys, and David Mayo, to me, is a depth player. They've got to find another linebacker. They've got to find another difference maker that complements the front four in front of them, that complements what's behind them, because those two positions on defense, those two groups look really strong at this point right now. We already know what they have up front, and we just talked about Daron Payne and John Allen, but then you have, Montez Sweat on one side and Chase Young on the other. Chase Young, coming back from an injury, played the final 3 games last year and actually, looked like he could get back to where he was in his rookie campaign, where he was the rookie defensive player of the year. Montez Sweat had a really good year, I thought. Could have finished some plays and would have had probably 3-4 more sacks. But overall, I thought he played really well, and that's why they justified them extending his 5th year. So you have your front four, but now you have depth. You have Ridgeway coming back. You think of Phidarian Mathis. He'll be back. Remember, he got hurt in the first game against Jacksonville, in the first series. So he'll be back. And now you have another guy that can add quality depth to that defensive front. Then, of course, in the secondary, I saw the emergence of a guy like Danny Johnson. I think he's warranted. He's a free agent. They're going to re-sign him. Mark my words, he'll be back. They love the kid. And then you have a guy like a Jeremy Reeves, who's another guy that made the Pro Bowl as a special teams guy, but he's a depth guy back there in the secondary too. And then, of course, I just mentioned the other guys, Cam Curl, Percy Butler, Derek Forrest. Those are your safeties. And then at the cornerback positions, one side of the field is locked up with Benji St. Juste. I'm a huge Benji St. Juste fan. You guys know I'm a Big Ten guy from Penn State. You already know. And then he was at Minnesota, so I got a chance to see him. And he's a physical, rangy, grabby type corner. And a lot of people say he's too aggressive. He has a lot of pass interference calls. I'd rather have my corners getting pass interferences on them as opposed to getting beat by lack of effort. You're not going to get that with Benji St. Juste. He's definitely an up-and-coming corner in this league. And if you can get somebody on the other side of him that's equally rangy like that, maybe Christian Gonzalez from Oregon, or maybe Joey Porter from Penn State, those guys I think could be nice fits. It'll be interesting to see if they're there at 16 when Washington picks. I think Porter might be. I think Gonzalez might go a little earlier depending on who's picking and what their need is. But if you can get another corner over there, that'll be a good thing. And yeah, I didn't forget about Kendall Fuller. Kendall Fuller, a great veteran presence, great locker room guy. But he's more of your slot guy. And I think at this point in his career, you can kind of use him in different ways where he doesn't have to be an every down, every day player out there on the outside at corner. So lots of stuff, folks, that we can talk about. Also want to give you a quick heads up that you'll see me on ABC WJLA in DC with my good friend Olivia Garvey breaking down Washington and some of the events over the past few days. So we're breaking all this stuff down. It's the off season, but it's still busy for all of us. And, this is what we do, in Indianapolis. And then, I'll be going to the league meetings in Arizona at the end of the month. And hopefully we'll have a new ownership change that I'll be able to report on. So there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about over the next few weeks. Right now, Washington Commanders are the off-season champs again, but this is in a good way. Not just making dumb moves. These are great moves. It's hard enough to get a really good offensive coordinator. It's another thing to get a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator who everyone and their mother knows should be a head coach on some team. Well, guess what? And I said it, and I'll say it again. Some people look at someone's trash as another person's treasure, and I think Eric Bieniemy is going to be treasured and valued here in D.C. I think people are going to embrace him here. I think he's got the ultimate opportunity to be a head coach, ultimately, and replace Ron Rivera when Ron Rivera decides to probably move upstairs. And that's trending. That looks like that's what's going to happen. And, I'm not a betting man like that, but if I had to put my money down on something, I would say Eric Bieniemy did not just leave Kansas City to be the coordinator for the Washington Commanders. I bet you there's some lingo in his contract that says that he's going to be the coach in waiting. It just would make sense if he's successful now, not something given to him, but something that he's earned because his offense is high flying and scoring points and looking like something we haven't seen here in a while. Jay Gruden had some decent offenses, but at the end of the day, they weren't winning. They weren't getting in the playoffs. And that's what's going to be the measuring stick now for Washington. And Eric Bieniemy said it out of his own mouth last week at his press conference. I was sitting right there, and he said, literally, what do you want to be known as, your offense? And he said just wins and losses. He wants to win football games. He said specifically he doesn't care about stats. He's not concerned about players and what they're doing as far as how many catches they're getting if you're a receiver, how many rushing yards you're getting or touches in the backfield, or how many, passes you're throwing. As long as what they're doing works and it's winning, he's going to stick with it. And I think that's definitely the right recipe for this Commanders team. So we're going to wrap it up, folks. As always, remember, you can subscribe to the podcast. You can listen to the audio version on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Deeker, you name the sites. It's on there. And then, of course, you can check this out on YouTube, on the Sports Journey.com YouTube page. You can subscribe there, or you can just go to sportsjourney.com and it'll be up there as well. So, as always, my friends, much love, and I appreciate you checking me out. We'll be doing this again real soon. Take care. Have a good one.